Glenn. You're on the cusp of making some very important news that this gang wants to know about, and I'm going to just frame it up briefly, Glenn, but I really at the start want you to frame up the significance of the news, and then maybe what the appeal was there. So for all of you, the surprise is that MicroVision is acquiring Luminar, and I think, Glenn, maybe even by the end of today that will be final. Is that I'm nervous as I say that.
Yeah, we're on track to complete the closing activities today, so that should be done. And barring any unforeseen circumstances, it should be closed this afternoon. So I think everything is all set.
Why don't you go ahead and just let it roll. Tell us the news, and then talk as long as you like, and then we'll take questions. I'll go on mute here for a second.
Yeah, so I think as most of you are aware, Luminar had entered into a bankruptcy proceeding, and at that time, this is back in December, and at that time, it had also announced that quantum computing was acquiring what's called LSI, or Luminar Semiconductor Inc., and that then the balance of Luminar Technologies, which is their automotive and their LiDAR facing business, was going to be going into an auction process. And then that occurred here, I think it was officially a week ago last Tuesday. So we entered into the auction process. And MicroVision was, we were fortunate enough to have won the auction. So that set in motion now us to close on that in today. So less than a week later. This was a fairly compressed timeline for auction to closing, to all of that to take place, given the circumstances. And so that's partially, Scott, why there wasn't as much discussion up front, just simply because hey, you got to get through the auction, determine how that that goes, and then you got to get the approval of the bankruptcy judge and all of these things, and then we can announce. So everything has gone very well, and all of the T's and C's and details have been checked, and so now it's just a matter of transacting the close, which, like I said, should happen today. With that, Luminar Tech becomes part of MicroVision. It'll be an integrated acquisition, so we're not going to maintain Luminar as a separate legal entity. We'll bring that into MicroVision, so it'll be part of MicroVision Inc. And the reason this was interesting for us, really, there's three reasons. The first, and these are all, I would say, similar degrees of importance, but the first was basically it accelerates MicroVision's commercial path, or the path to revenue. Luminar has a number of customers, some of which you've seen in the press before, and I'll speak to those customer relationships in just a minute. But it was, they have many existing and ongoing customer relationships where they're selling either their product Iris, current production product, or they're working on the development with Halo, their next generation product. And so with this acquisition, MicroVision takes over those relationships, over those programs, and that essentially accelerates our time to revenue in the marketplace, and giving us the opportunity not just to work on those programs, but potentially expand the relationships with those customers with our short range offering, Scantinel, our full portfolio. And that kind of leads to the second point, which is when we looked at Luminar's portfolio, it was a nice fit with what we're doing. It's 15-15 time of flight, and so it gives us a long range 15-50 time of flight automotive capable sensor now. So that's Halo. And whereas we were in the development of that, and so it brings that forward and gives us that offering. So we're in a position now today to be able to offer long range, short range for automotive, which is exactly what we want. And so from a portfolio standpoint, it really accelerated that piece of the portfolio, which we think is important for us. Keep in mind Scantinel, which is also 15-50, but FMCW, A sample is sometime beginning of next year, and then you can begin the sales cycle after that. So that's still a year plus away. This brings that forward. And then the third piece of it was the global talent. There's just a lot of very talented engineers at Luminar globally. They have a strong presence, whether it's in Japan or it's in Sweden or it's in here in Orlando, in the U.S. in Orlando. It was a great talent base that we can combine now with MicroVisions, and so it was a real nice fit from a talent and capability standpoint. And so that's what we're focused on right now is, okay, that integration. How do we combine those engineering capabilities, the supply chain management capabilities, the sales and commercial organization capabilities? So from a talent standpoint, we really like how this fits into our existing talent pool. And so that integration activity is starting now. So when we looked at it with those three kind of aspects in mind, that's why it was attractive to us. And as I mentioned, we entered into the auction. We're able to get it over the line, and this is again public knowledge, for a $33 million acquisition price. We're in a good position to do that, so that was good. And now it's on to integration, and really probably the top priority for us is reestablishing and kind of engaging in those customer relationships. And so and as you can imagine, when a company is going into a bankruptcy, that process, they're on that path that can put some strain on customer relationships. And some of this was very public in particular with the articles that I think we've all seen around, Volvo and some of the other concerns. And so our focus is on reestablishing those relationships, but with MicroVision. And these are all companies that fortunately I've done a lot of business with in the past. In general, know a lot of people in those companies, and I think this is where MicroVision, with our automotive experience and our leadership's experience and our style and how we approach things, I'm very confident that we can kind of repair those relationships where that they need to repair, or build on relationships that are still very good. And just what I'm doing now is basically reassuring the customer base that this outcome with MicroVision taking over Luminar is actually a very good thing for them. We intend to stabilize, restart those relationships and take care of those customers, and we know how to do that. So that's the part of it that I'm excited about. I really enjoy having those discussions with the customers and making sure that we're supporting them in the way that they need to build the business. And so that is priority one. Integration of the organizations comes with that as priority kind of two, and then we go from there. Like I said earlier, it's really fun to be able to now offer those Luminar's customers the portfolio that we have with short range LiDAR and what we're doing there. At the same time, we can now offer the customers we've been talking to the technology that Luminar has developed, and so which we think applies to all of our end markets as well. So that's kind of a synopsis of the overall, kind of deal rationale, where we are, and now next steps.
Well, I see everybody's got the hang of this. They're raising their hands already, Glenn. So,
Yeah.
but let me, before I turn it over to them, there's just two questions I want to get out because I think this information is important. First one is, you use the term 1550, which I think is a frequency number. Is there another way to characterize the long range that you're getting? Is there a distance or a way that we could interpret what long range is versus short range?
Yeah, it would typically 1550 is the wavelength, so that's 1550 nanometers, and then that's effectively you're in the 180 to depending on how much power you put behind it, 180 to 500, 600. But typically with Halo and the products and Iris and the products they've developed, we think of that as 200 to 250 meter type of range.
Okay, thank you. And then the other thing I think is important to bear out is this is your second acquisition at MicroVision in recent months, and
Yep.
maybe not your last. I don't want to spill any news yet, but remind everybody the first purchases. I think there's some dots that are being connected here, right?
Yeah, we closed on the acquisition of Scantinel Photonics in January 1st, actually. So that was the acquisition we had announced. I think it was back in November. It takes a little bit longer with Germany. And in that case, we've maintained that Scantinel as its own legal entity. So it's Scantinel GmbH. And under MicroVision as a wholly owned subsidiary, we closed on that January 1st, and that is also 1550 nanometer, but it is FMCW, and it's a fundamentally different architecture in terms of the it's using a photonics integrated circuit, or a PIC, for the transceiver module. So the lasers, the optical amplifiers, the detectors are all mounted onto a chip scale package, which we call the PIC. And so it's a very advanced form of packaging. The laser, the send and receive module, the transceiver module, in a monostatic design, so a single lens. And what's exciting about that acquisition is it really focused in. It was a smaller team. It really focused in on the chip scale packaging of the transceiver itself. And so we think that we believe that tech can apply ultimately to what we want to do in the other technologies, whether it's 905 or 940 or 1550 time of flight. And that's why that was interesting to us, even though it's a longer term technology to develop. We're looking, like I said earlier, looking at an A sample here in the first quarter of next year, and then being able to really showcase what that technology can do. Ultimately, that'll be for what we would call long range and ultra long range. And so it has applications out beyond 250, up to kind of 300, 350 meters and beyond. So that was the acquisition in beginning of January, and then here in the beginning of February. And kind of to your comment about are these the only acquisitions? What I would tell you is, and we said this in the press release earlier, this is an industry that we think can benefit from consolidation. And so, if you think about MicroVision, this is now, the third, we acquired Ibeo about 3 years ago, Scantinel, now Luminar. And what's exciting there is we're able to take, the kind of the different building blocks of technology elements, and then combine those into the right solutions for the various end markets, and then cover a broad category of markets with those core technologies, which we think gives us a very good competitive position in the marketplace. So, but now it's on to full integration of Luminar into the business. And that's what we're really focused and excited about.
All right, let's go to the questions. So, guys, if you wouldn't mind, just introduce yourself and your outlet or outlets, whatever you prefer, so that Glenn knows who you're representing. So, Jim, I see you first. Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I don't see. Oh, actually, Paul Eisenstein usually asks the first question. But
you're up, buddy. You got it.
I can't believe you let me. All right. Well, I have a two-parter. He usually has two-parters, so I'm going to give you a two-parter. One, I wonder how much this has to do with the bankruptcy of Luminar, how much it has to do with personal problems of the former CEO of Luminar, Austin Roberts, and he was being internally investigated. And I saw that their stock had basically plunged. Is that basically what it did? It had something, it didn't really have anything to do with the technology. And the other thing I wanted to ask you about is phantom braking has a problem in autonomous vehicles, and how much you think that's a problem.
Yeah. So on the first point, yeah, I mean, and this has been highly publicized, in terms of some of the drama that surrounded the prior management team and leadership there, and the change of CEO, and what I would tell you is those things are never, they're never helpful. I mean, that's usually not helpful in terms of running the business when you're dealing with all of that. It can be a distraction. But coming to your point, no, it wasn't really so much the tech itself, and that's what we determined. It was more that the cost structure of the business was essentially mistimed for the revenue that it was going to see from those end applications, from and what they thought would be coming. And this is, I think, broadly what's happened with the LiDAR industry, where there was a lot of expectation, 3, 4, 5 years ago about LiDAR adoption, big volumes, massive adoption, and at price points that, would justify significant burn rates for for these companies. And what we see here is, yeah, there was a very substantial burn rate that the company had in terms of cash consumption, and the revenue didn't come. And ultimately, there's only so much, with debt structure and everything else, there's only so much you can do. And for Luminar in particular, it just ran out of time to recover. And so, we didn't look at it as we don't see a technology problem. We don't see, hey, it's a bad fit for the market. It was just more of a case of timing. And in auto, revenue and volumes are never guaranteed. You're always subject to take rates of the OEMs and how the penetration rates, which is why you always want to be really, really careful about how you put, where you manage your structural costs to, if this is your business. It also puts a premium on why you want to have other revenue streams than just auto. This is why we always talk about industrial, we talk about security and defense. It's because you want to diversify your revenue streams and not just be, auto pure play, where that revenue can take a long time to come. And so I think you're seeing this broadly. This is a case where it just kind of ran out of runway, but not technology. On the phantom braking issue, I'm not sure if I understand your question fully, but is that where, cars brake because they think they see something, and when there's nothing there? Is that what
Well,
you're
there's
referring
been
to?
a fair number of incidents in which, and this is not necessarily relating to trucks, but
Yeah,
Volvo taxis also stopped
yeah,
abruptly, and then other drivers ran into them.
yeah.
And
It is to answer your question, that
it's
is,
been linked to, as particularly uh, autonomous systems that are all based on cameras, where they might see
yeah,
shadows or they might see something that looks like an obstacle that isn't
yeah,
there.
yeah. That is an issue. I mean, because if a car stops when there's, when it's, I mean, as we're driving, we're following a car, and everybody's traveling on the roadway, at speed, and then a car suddenly stops. That is very concerning because, nobody expects it to happen. And, we saw this, not necessarily this, same thing, but we had, seen when we were back when I was involved with the fleets that we had in Vegas and everything else. Sudden stops, you got to be very careful with. And it's really a matter of how you train the system or how you tune the system. And because, it's a false negative where you think there's something there, car comes to a stop and cars around it don't expect it, and you have an accident. So, and that just gets back, and from our perspective, it gets back to how robust is the perception system in terms of being able to say, I see something or I don't see something. And that's why for us, multimodal perception is so critical, because you can look at it through, three different modalities. You can look at the environment through three different modalities. And the one thing that LiDAR does really, really, really well is free space detection. It can see if there is an object in front of you. And it's not trying to infer that by looking at an image, it measures it directly. And which is why LiDAR is such a critical technology. That said, you still have to train the system to interpret what the perception system is seeing. And phantom braking is that will inhibit, that'll be a negative in terms of the adoption of the technology for whatever market it's serving. Because people, that's not normal behavior, and these cars have to behave normally. So, that's why I think it is so important to have, LiDAR and these, really capable LiDAR systems on these vehicles. But, you still have to train on top of that. So we've seen some of those same things as well. And it's tough because on the one hand, you don't want to stop for something, but you want to be careful as well and conservative. And so it's a bit of a balancing act there.
Let's go to Paul Eisenstein. Paul, go ahead. Paul, you're on mute though. Still can't hear you. There's a icon on the bottom. Do you see it?
On the left side.
So maybe in the meantime, we have some more on.
Yeah,
the-
maybe Paul, I'll come back to you if you can.
Yep.
There
You
we go.
should be-
There we go.
Yeah,
There we go.
it decided it wanted to connect with a microphone I don't have connected. Sorry about that. Glenn, good to see you, first of all, thanks.
Yeah.
It was good to see you out in Vegas. You've touched on some of this, so I just want to pull it all together clearly. Anytime you merge two companies, especially one that has been troubled, we talked a little bit about that. There are challenges.
Mhm.
The social and corporate culture, getting companies to recognize you've changed the management, you've maybe lowered some of the risk. I want to get you to talk a little bit about the challenges on the social, on the functioning as a supplier, and also on the technology standpoint, because obviously you are two separate companies. You're now having to figure out how to make it work all together. Let's start with them. I may want to follow up on something.
Yeah, integration of two different, when you bring in together two different entities, that is always a challenge, because you have different cultures, you have different histories, you have, different capabilities typically. And so there's always challenges with those integrations. Now, what I've found, having done it a number of times, is there's, two things that you have to really kind of almost over-index on. The first is make sure everybody understands what the goals are, what you're trying to accomplish as a business, as a unified business. And for engineering organizations like ours, that's a very clear product roadmap. Here are the products that we're going to be developing, and here is the role that each part of the organization is going to play. And in particular for engineering organizations, that tends to then help kind of unify the organization around, the strategy and around the direction of the business. And it gives you time then to work the other really critical aspect, which is, more on the social or the soft skills side, which is spending time with those teams and, the teams that you've brought in, but also, the existing teams where they're seeing people come in, spending times with them to make sure you're addressing concerns, you're addressing questions, and taking the friction out of the system, because it's a big adjustment. It's a big change. It's a change for the company that was acquired. It's a change for the company that acquired them. And I mean, and it's a combination of, all hands meetings, it's one-on-ones, it's small group, and it's, you have to invest a significant amount of time and energy into that. Now, even with all of that, there will be some, you typically would expect, hey, there's some people that, don't want to go through that. So there will be some attrition, there will be some loss, and, that's where you just have to be really, cognizant of where is it working, where do I need to spend more time, and get everybody focused on what the goal is. And for us, we're fortunate we can really clearly articulate that. We know what the near-term goals are in terms of, getting Halo moved, from B sample into production, getting Movia S or short range sensor into, B in production sample and winning business with that. And then ultimately getting, and we talked about this in Vegas, getting the organization excited, not just about those kind of current products and technologies, but about where we're trying to go as a business, which is I want much lower cost LiDAR. I want to get to that $100 quarter sensor. I want to get to that, sub 250 long range sensor to really drive and win in this marketplace. And so it's getting the organization really focused on that, spending time with the teams to make sure they're coming together and they're working well together. The good news is, and this is why I mentioned the people in the beginning, the good news is the engineers are really excited about this. I mean, they really are. And it's fun. This is actually fun to see. As they're coming together and they're talking, you can see them just, I mean, it's a case where the engineers are really excited to learn what the other, what the Luminar engineers were doing, what we're doing, share. And I'm confident that our teams will be able to get through that and really work well together. On the customer side, it's a little bit different, but it's kind of the same. As you take over contracts and relationships, it's a matter of trust, right? You've got to build that trust. You have to reassure the customer or the supplier partner, hey, you're somebody that they can work with and that they can grow with. And that's where, for us, for MicroVision, like myself and some of the other people, Greg Scharnbrook that we brought on as well, Fraser, it's important, we have a lot of automotive experience, which is where most of Luminar's customers are. So we have a lot of automotive experience. We understand that market. We understand their needs. And so it's spending the time with them to basically build up that confidence where needed and then deliver. And so you have to deliver. And so that's the key focus for us there.
Follow-up?
Yeah, just very fast one. Do we expect to see consolidation, reduction in workforce? Will we see movement in production sites and so on, which also are fairly typical in something like this?
Yeah, that's what we're working through right now. Is kind of where does that make sense to do some consolidation and to bring things together. So there will be some of that. We'll probably talk more about that later in the month or as we kind of work through the integration. You're always looking for where can I gain efficiencies along with the capability. Luminar has a great facility in Orlando where they were building Iris, and a phenomenal lab. And so that's a natural site of where I would do production in the U.S. So those are all the things that the team is kind of working through now. So not too much to share today, but when you consolidate, there is inherently and usually a benefit from efficiencies, in terms of when you do that. It's not just bolting on burn rates, and it's well, how do I optimize and how do I deliver what the two companies were delivering, but for less resources and costs that they were, when operating independently.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks.
Yep.
Let's go to Daron. Daron was shoveling his driveway. That's why he's wearing the clothes to stay warm. Go ahead, Daron.
Well, I'm looking out my window and I'm just waiting. It'll be my turn soon. So
Hey, so-
unless you want to come up here, Daron, I'd be happy to.
You pay somebody. That's what you want to do. Good to see you again, and congratulations on this growth opportunity. If that's what it turns out to be, it looks like it's very promising. Just have one quick question about the Volvo contract. One analysis that I read suggested that the split with Volvo and the decision not to use LiDAR in a couple of future models was consequential in Luminar's failure.
Yeah.
Have you been able to determine whether there's a possibility to resurrect that contract, or are you going to play a future role at Volvo? Is there some way to get back into those programs that were eliminated under Luminar?
We're certainly going to talk to them about it. That was a very public kind of breakup, if you will. That there was a lot of articles about that and a lot of reporting on that. And, I will certainly be speaking with Volvo about what we would like to do and how we would like to proceed with them. I think the opportunity is there, but without having sat down and talked to them about it, I really can't say, hey, how do I think it's going to go? But I can tell you, and this is what I would tell them, is, we're interested in finding a way to work with them and to, kind of to build on all the work that had been done. There was a lot of very good work that was done there. It didn't end well in reality. I mean, in terms of take rates and, for that investment in time and energy, the results, were unfortunately, I think, disappointing for them as well as Luminar. We'll talk to them about how we think we can help them going forward. And my assessment is that we have the ability to do that, but ultimately it's got to work for them. And so we'll see what we can do here over the next days and weeks.
I guess what I was kind of looking for was whether you feel that Volvo had a general disenchantment with LiDAR, or whether they were disenchanted with Luminar. And I couldn't get much from the analysis I read which it was.
It may be a little bit of both. I mean, and this is not unique to Volvo. I mean, there have been a lot of LiDAR developments, level 3 developments, including LiDAR in the industry that didn't really, develop the way people had hoped in terms of volume, penetration rates, or even the capability of the system. And so I think in general, what I would say, and I don't know I haven't talked to Volvo, so I don't know where their thinking is. In general, I would say the industry still views LiDAR as required for level 3, not for level 2, but for level 3 and above. And, so there's still a strong interest, certainly with OEMs in looking at it. But as we've talked, it's got to be LiDAR at the, with the right performance at the right price. So it enables them to sell something that the consumers are, willing to pay for, and gives them sufficient value. And I think that's been a large part of what's missing, is the level 3 options are very expensive, and they haven't been that compelling to the end consumer, certainly not enough to buy in mass. Volvo kind of feels a little bit the same way. And so I think that's why, the strategy that we've been talking about, which is, hey, we're going to lower the cost of the sensor so that you can afford it, not just for level 3, today, but ultimately level 2, because we think it is a good sensing technology. But with Volvo in particular, haven't had those discussions yet, so I'm sure I'll learn more. And then our hope is very simple. We would love to be working much more closely with them on the next generation product.
Thanks
All right,
very
let's
much.
go to Joe White. Joe, I got to compliment you on that background. What am I looking at over your shoulder? Is that yours?
Yeah, Glenn probably knows what it is. It's a 61 Dodge Town Wagon.
Yeah.
That at some point, if the snow ever goes away, I'll get back to driving around. It's good fun.
Nice.
Very analog.
That's totally analog.
Yeah, very analog. No LiDAR. All right, look, I know other people want to ask questions, so I'll try to get to the point with mine. Glenn, I'm wondering if you could talk about one, and you've you've addressed this just now when you're talking about, level 3, level 2, and the need to get the cost down. But, one, how big do you see the LiDAR market, kind of growing to be from where it's at? But two, how do you compete for that market with the Chinese companies that, appear to be, leaders, at least in terms of volume and presumably also in terms of cost? I mean, does the fact that you're a Western, U.S. company, do you take advantage of the concerns about Chinese technology? I'll stop there and let you answer. Thanks.
Sure. Yeah. In terms of size of market, I mean, that's a great question. There's a large range. What we've determined is, and this is what really, for automotive, that's still considered, hey, we think that's going to be the biggest market, the biggest TAM. But the issue is when, is it 3 years from now, 5 years, 10 years? And so, we want to be in that space, but it's unclear necessarily how fast that market really develops. We think we can help it develop faster by lowering the price. But it also means it's important for us to go into other markets where LiDAR is well established, like industrial, where we think we can take share, by virtue of offering solid state LiDAR at a much lower price than what the current ASPs are. And then defense is a newer market where with drones and UGVs, you're seeing, you're now seeing very large projections on LiDAR consumption rates. But ultimately, to your point, in all three markets, it's, we think cost of the product is a key enabler for market growth and mass adoption. Now, you mentioned a really important point. You got Hesai, RoboSense, Xeon. There are a number of Chinese LiDAR companies that, have, are on record with very aggressive pricing. And having competed with China for many years, at the end of the day, they will set the price. And now there are some things we can use to our advantage. You alluded to the fact that we're a US based and a German based LiDAR provider. And so in particular around security and defense, that's impactful. We're like one of the only short range LiDAR providers in the US or in Europe. And so that's helpful in that market. For industrial and automotive, ultimately, you just have to be able to compete head to head with the Chinese suppliers. And which means you can't just, it can't just be a hardware play. And because, you'll lose that battle. They'll compete. If you're competing on hardware costs alone, that's tough. And that's why, for us, we're trying to drive our costs down through software and through using, more advanced software in the point cloud generation, solving it in software, not in hardware, and doing more on the software front. And so that's been our focus. How do we lower our price point so we can be competitive with the Chinese suppliers, not competing exactly on hardware from them, hardware from us. The other part of it is what we talked about, the open software framework, where we, create a much more open environment for the OEMs and our customers to develop their systems on our platform. And so we think that's a differentiator as well. But it's, I look at what the Chinese suppliers are doing as actually good for the market, as it drives competition, it drives costs down. And ultimately that's how, LiDAR will be adopted, is it gets to a price point where it gets on every vehicle. And that competitive pressure coming from China, really forces us in the industry to look at ways for lowering costs and how we can compete. So to me, it's a healthy competitive, environment, but I'm confident that we'll be able to compete with that.
Hey, Glenn, before we move off of Joe's question, and before we get to Dirk, you
Yeah.
briefed us at the House of Journals, and some of the gang here did not hear this. You made a point about the sizable forklift potential, and I think there was even a fact you talked about the cost of the average crash in a factory. Do you remember those? Can you restate that?
Yeah,
Just because I want
yeah.
people to know that's sizable, and when it's coming, maybe compared to automotive. I don't know if it's sooner than automotive.
Yeah,
or
well,
not.
what we were talking about was the industrial ADAS, which doesn't really exist today. I mean, there's a little bit, but it's not what I would call a mature market by any means. AGVs and AMRs have used LiDAR for quite some time, and then as you get into fully automated forklifts or fully automated industrial automation for like robotics and mainly for package retrieval or storage inside of an automated warehouse. You know, that LiDAR is used quite a bit for that, but there's also the market of industrial ADAS for, you know, for human operated forklifts and tuggers and all of the equipment. It actually extends into construction equipment as well, where there really isn't ADAS today. And what's been interesting is we see that this is an area where ADAS is needed. And historically, the on-cost for an ADAS system has just been too high. You know, $10,000. By the time you had a sensor and kitted out in the vehicle, you know, it's 10 grand of on-cost in the vehicle. That may only be 40,000, 50,000 US dollars. So it just doesn't work. But with the solid state LiDAR solutions we have, where we can bring that cost down to well below 1,000, suddenly adding, you know, an ADAS system to a forklift becomes not just affordable, but very interesting. But again, it's enabled because the cost is so much lower, and our sensor has on it the processing that you can use for the safety algorithms, and it may just be for slowing the forklift down. It doesn't have to be, you know, it's not quite like ADAS in an automobile where you're looking at lane keep assist and, you know, blind spot detection and all these other things. This is more basic, where you're just looking to avoid hitting something and slowing the thing down so the operator can adjust his path. And I think what you're referring to, Scott, is the OSHA report from 24, which I think there's like, in the US, there's about 30,000 forklifts, you know, recorded forklift accidents a year at over the annual cost of around 110,000.
That's crazy.
Think about it. If you think about it, a forklift does can do a lot of damage. And so there's a real market there as you think about forklift productivity, safety, you know, safety in that space, and just, you know, accident avoidance. It's, you know, we think we have the technology that can be a very nice fit for that market, and much more reliable and robust of a solution than trying to do it with a camera, trying to do it with RF, you know, locators. And so that's the other part of industrial that I think is really exciting. So as we bring down the cost of these short range LiDARs, using them, especially when they're as robust as what we're talking about, these solid state LiDARs, using them for industrial ADAS is a great fit. And then it extends into construction equipment, it extends into a whole another group of applications where just driver assistance systems don't exist today and can be very helpful from a safety and a cost standpoint.
All right, let's get to Dirk. He's been very patient. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Dirk.
Hi, Glenn. Dirk Kunde, writing for Automobile Industry in Germany. A couple of days ago, Mercedes-Benz showed the refresh of the S-Class, and they announced they were going to skip from an existing level 3 system and just kick it out of the car. And because the take rate was unbelievable low, it was very expensive. So what kind of signal does that send to the market? And second part of the question is, you talked about cost. The cost of LiDAR has to go down. What role does liability play? Are the OEMs so hesitant because liability goes over from level 2 to 3 to their part if an accident happens? Is that maybe also a reason why they're so shy?
Yeah, so a couple questions there. The first one, because I read the same thing, that Mercedes was canceling their level 3 offering. And what was interesting to me, and my takeaway, is that it validated what we've been saying about LiDAR just being too expensive. And it's not the only expensive component when you get into a level 3. You know, you have to have fail operational capability and redundancy, and there are other costs as well. But LiDAR is one of the big, is one of the big cost elements to that. And I think that, ultimately, it's part of why our strategy is, hey, I have to drive the cost of LiDAR down, so it's not an on cost of the vehicle of 9 or 10,000 euros, which then leads to, very, very low take rates. It's really a very small option. And so I think, for the OEMs and the challenge is, okay, even if I can, as I bring the cost of LiDAR down, still, what use cases and utility does that enable for them to sell to their end consumer? And I think, that's partially kind of what the OEMs are grappling with, right now, is what does their next generation of system need to look like? What I would tell you is there's still a very strong interest in LiDAR. There's a strong interest in short-range LiDAR, so that things like parking, self-parking, urban driving, vulnerable road user detection can be improved significantly, and LiDAR can certainly do that. And these are features that I think are important to the end consumer. And so we don't see that, LiDAR is still, we haven't seen a drop or a reduction in interest in LiDAR as part of those systems from the OEMs. That we're not seeing. We're still seeing a strong interest, but it all revolves around, well, when can you give me a sub $200 sensor? When can you give me a sensor that's $100? It's still very much a cost issue in terms of the on cost of the vehicle. And then you asked, I think, a really important question around liability. And I do think when the liability shifts from the driver, the driver, the operator of the vehicle, to the OEM, that is a big concern. Now, the good news, and it means that the OEMs have to be very thoughtful about what features they enable, because it's not, if they get out too far ahead of the technology and and then they take on too much risk, that's not good. So I think it does, it does force, that liability question does force the OEMs to really think about, what am I going to offer? How do I offer incremental steps in autonomy that are high confidence and ultimately safer than a human-driven car, so that, the statistics bear that out, and that it's a safer, end solution. But I do think the liability question is a big part of the OEMs thinking about their introduction and what they introduce and how much risk they're really willing to take. They want to be differentiated. They want to have advanced technology. They want to, they see the tech moving very quickly in China, coming into other markets. So there's a lot of pressure, but I think, the liability question still is a very important one. And so I think you'll see features being rolled out, but very carefully, by the traditional OEMs. I don't think you'll see this big bang kind of approach.
Yeah, I see Sam. Before you go, Sam, Chris Klons, did you have a question still? Did we miss you? I don't know if he's still on there or not. And
No,
Jeremy-
he addressed my industrial ADAS question. So
okay, you're
thank you.
good.
Appreciate it.
And Jeremy Wolf, I saw your name a little bit ago. Are you good? I'm going to assume he is. Sorry, Sam. You're up.
All right. Hey, Glenn. Sorry, I had to join.
Hey,
late.
Sam.
I had another call. Excuse me if you've talked about this already, but with the acquisition of the Luminar assets, I'm just curious. Are you is the plan to continue development of, I guess, particularly the Halo sensor? Probably, I assume you're not going to do much with the Iris technology, but more with the Halo. which is the next generation sensor.
Yeah.
And how low do you think you can get the price? What's the strategy for getting the cost of that sensor down to be competitive with the likes of Hesai and RoboSense?
Yeah.
And particularly now that Hesai is building a factory in Thailand to produce sensors for the non-Chinese market.
Yeah.
Are you going to be able to be price competitive with the likes of those Chinese companies?
Yeah. So on the technologies, I think what's key is for Iris, it's more about just supporting current production obligations for that sensor. They have a number of customers that are consuming Iris today, various levels of volume. And we want to make sure that those customers can continue to buy and be supported by MicroVision now for their needs where they're using Iris. And that's a meaningful revenue stream that comes with that, and a number of different customers that come with that. So as we kind of reestablish, if you think about it, their contracts and those relationships were all with old Luminar. We now have to reestablish those with MicroVision. So we'll talk about that as they get set up, and we kind of establish a new plan for each of those customers. That'll be the Iris story. As it relates to Halo, Halo is more or less going into kind of a B sample phase. So what we're doing now is looking exactly at what you're describing is where do we think that that can get to, and what's the appropriate cost structure for that. And so because ultimately that long range, if you think about it, long range LiDAR offerings for automotive, the expectation is, hey, they're going to be below 500 USD. That's kind of the current expectation for product that would probably be launching in the 28, 29 timeframe. It's going to be sub 500 for that long range, 120 by 25 or 30 degree, 200 meter field of view LiDAR. And so I think team was confident Halo's on a path to getting there. I'm also focused on, well, what's the next step? Because it needs to go well below that longer term. And so what we're focused on right now, Sam, is just kind of, okay, let's make sure we've got Halo development moving forward at the pace it needs to in terms of market timing. And then also, okay, where else can I optimize costs? In particular, based on the things I've done with MicroVision already, with the work that we've done, and then long term with the work that Scantinel is doing on the chip scale packaging for the transceiver module. So more work to be done before I can answer the question ultimately. But yeah, you have to be competitive. Whether it's size in China or it's in Thailand, they're going to be one of the strongest competitive benchmarks. RoboSense right next to them. And so we have to be competitive with them, and below that. We were on a pathway to doing that. Now with Luminar, I think I'm confident we can get there. But with 1550, it'll look a little different. Hopefully have better range, better capability, better resistance, from an eye safety standpoint versus the 940 or 905. Better weather resilience. We think it offers some other technical advantages as well.
And are you going to replace the Maven with the Luminar technology, or are you going to keep that in the product lineup as well?
Well, the MEMS scanning, it's basically fully developed, and I have that as a technology building block. It tends to have a narrower field of view, so it may not, it isn't the best fit for 120, field of view. That's where it's, scanning, with a spinning type of mirror or whatever tends to work, expands the field of view in the horizontal direction. But to me, it won't be we're not looking at it so much as a replacement, but rather, what can I take out of my approach with Maven and combine that with Halo to get to a lower cost system? So that's what we're looking at now as we bring those teams together, is how do I take the best elements out of each one to help drive that system cost down? So I'm not gonna end up with two competing long range LiDAR. No, that's not a effective way to go. It's more about how do I integrate those technologies in the best way possible to lower cost.
All right, thanks.
Let's
bet.
go to Banked. And by the way, Banked, you should introduce yourself with your new awards title. I don't know if
Yeah.
Glenn caught up to that news. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi there. Bengt Halverson with Wards. Nice to see you, Glenn. So far in this call, I've heard you talk so much about cost competitiveness, as I have in the past, about making all of these lines coexist and over a broad, array of different uses and being competitive with China. But the missing piece here, I think, is the combined company and volume and the overall picture, say, a year, 2 years, 5 years from now. How much stronger in terms of volume do you see the combined company being able to do versus China versus competitors? And how do you see it shaking out between these product lines that Sam was just asking about?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because that's the same question the board asked me. My board asked me, is what's the business rationale for it? And and that's ultimately the objective here. We had a 5-year business plan pre-Luminar acquisition, and what was attractive about this is it really it pulled forward the revenue component of that and the customer engagement component. And so, it basically dramatically accelerated that whole sales cycle. And I can tell you, in talking with customers now, they're excited about the fact that I can offer the complete solution, which, today, which I wasn't able to previously. We were talking very much about short range and then very much about future plans on long range. Well, I can bring all of that to bear now, which is, I think, significantly strengthens our commercial position. And, I can harmonize all of those sensors as well. So from a customer standpoint, it's just much easier. And so what that translates to, in our opinion, is acceleration of the revenue curve and where we want to be relative to, financially and to our financial models. Now, we haven't given long-term guidance, and we won't be doing that today. But I can tell you that from our perspective, I didn't join Luminar to be the 5th or 6th largest LiDAR company. We want to be in the top 3 or 2 as quickly as we can, and to be able to do that by being successful in those 3 verticals that we talk about, and automotive and industrial, as well as in security and defense. And the key enabler, certainly for automotive and industrial, is cost. And so that's why you hear me talk about it so much. But and I think with Luminar, pulls forward those commercial engagements. It gives us relationships that we were developing, but now we have. It can leverage that to help that book of business, to help accelerate market penetration across both long range as well as short range, the full portfolio. And and that's the benefit that we think is so critical for the business.
One follow-up. Short of actual guidance, could you give us an idea of, say, how much this can potentially multiply the scope of your business by having these complementary lines that can sort of present as a full portfolio of solutions to people?
Well, I'm not sure that I can give you that answer today. I will be speaking to that during our earnings call. That'll come up here about a month from now. So that'll be where I focus in on what does this mean from a financial expectation standpoint. So But what I would tell you from today is just getting the positioning with multiple customers that where we have the opportunity not just to sell long range, but also short range too, as well as other services. It's a meaningful accelerant to that revenue, to the revenue curve, and it shortens up our time to basically break even. So from a financial standpoint, it was very compelling. Now, all that was predicated on what the right cost of acquisition would be, and the synergies. Those are that we worked through. But today, everything looks like, yeah, this was absolutely the right thing for us to do, right value in terms of the acquisition costs, and everything we're learning now and doing as part of the integration. And my feedback from customers certainly is confirming that.
Thank you.
Like maybe we'll convince Glenn to do another one of these around the earnings call. I don't know if we can do that, but maybe that'd be
Hey,
helpful.
Scott, I'm happy to talk to you. Happy to talk to you and the team anytime.
Hey, there's interest, and we can't even do this in 1 hour. Look at this. Sorry,
Yeah, that's
John.
good.
We're Glenn. I hope you have a few more minutes. I just will let John go, and then maybe
Yeah.
you can close with some comments. So go ahead, John.
Yeah,
You're on mute
thanks.
though. Yep.
You hearing me now?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Three quick ones, Glenn. Scantinel goes bankrupt, you buy it. Luminar goes bankrupt, you buy it. What else are you sniffing out there?
Here's what I would tell you. And I've said this before, in a market where consolidation I think needs to occur, then what you find is you just got to pay attention and see, well, where are those opportunities, and do they bring what can they bring? And I've known the Luminar team for many years, and so I was very familiar with their technology, with the organization, and so that's why this one, for me, was actually really exciting, because for a long time I thought, there's got to be a way for us to work together, and we were able to make that happen now. And you don't always want these things to occur through a bankruptcy process or an insolvency process. When that does happen, though, it forces the issue, because it's going to go somewhere. And this one, to me, always made sense for MicroVision, even before I joined MicroVision. And so I was happy that we were able to do it. But I think my philosophy on M&A is, you always have to look at where are the opportunities to accelerate value creation. And when you can get it done for the right price and the backing of your investors and the board, it's worth looking at. And it requires work, but there's value there. And that certainly was the case here.
Yeah. How's MicroVision financing this? Debt, equity, investor money? How are you?
It's a mix. So typically what we do is debt and equity. And so more to come on that in some of our filings in the 10Ks. And so we'll be, as a public company, we'll be very transparent about our financial constructs.
Got it. And then last one, how's that work with OEM? I'm just curious about this one. Luminar had OEM contract. Now you're able to get that. Do you just sort of take over the same terms, or how's that all work?
Not necessarily. It's at its core, you're changing, the contract with an OEM, the purchase orders, the contract, from one legal entity to another. And whenever that occurs, you got to look at the T's and C's and make sure they still work, and that what had been agreed to is what you want to agree to going forward. Generally speaking, we don't expect a lot of, massive renegotiation of that can be very disruptive. And so we'll see. I can tell you, we're not interested in taking on business where I'm going to lose money to fulfill the terms. That's destroying value. And so we don't need to do that. And I don't think that's required in this case, based on what I know. But as a rule, we're not going to take on things that burn cash. but you got to take them case by case. Every one of these things tends to be a little bit different depending on what the contract entailed. But it's just, you got to go through it's just hard work. You got to go through the contracts. You got to get the new legal entities set up in their systems. You got to get the contracts updated, revised, signed off. So there's work to be done there, and we want to move through that very quickly so that we can restart the supply line and get them product. And so have done that before many times, where we've either taken over a company or we've acquired a supplier that is supplying others, and so it's just it's just the work you got to go through, but you do it one at a time. That's the unfortunate reality.
Well, good. Thanks.
All right. We're going to take one last question. So I see Jerome's got his hand up. Go ahead, Jerome.
Hey, Jerome.
You're on the mute again. You got to unmute.
Sorry. Look, I'm a little puzzled. I looked at the stock chart while we were talking here. I got a little distracted, and I saw the shares are trading for like 80 cents a share or something like that.
Yeah.
Are you concerned about delisting? Is this a problem for you?
No, well, if it goes on for long enough, yeah. But no, I'm not concerned about that. I think what we can do, we have the means to address that, and I'm confident that we will here in the next weeks, and as we integrate, announce what we're doing, and so I'm not losing sleep over delisting.
But and I don't mean to press on this point, but I would have expected that if you had won this auction, that represents some consolidation, there might have been additional market interest, but there doesn't seem to be additional market interest in the stock right now. So I'm wondering if you can kind of interpret that, what you think the market thinks, and why there is an interest at the moment. I mean, you're presenting a positive case, which is impressive, and I like it, but why aren't people buying? Do you think?
I think there's, because we have to get we have to explain to the investors in the market, why this is the right thing for MicroVision to do, both in terms of what it does. I mean, some of the questions that were being asked, what it does to the outlook, the financial outlook, how do we fit it in and not just bolt on a new burn rate. So I think the market in general, I would characterize it more of a wait and see what we're going to do. Now that we're closing today, we're in a position where we can actually, we'll be able to talk about that in more explicit terms as we normalize relationships with customer. Saying that, again, it allows us to articulate that. I'm confident that as we do that, the valuation issue, the questions will get answered, and the stock will move in the direction we're certainly hopeful it does.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank
Thanks.
you, guys.
Yep.
See you,
Hey.
and wishing you lots of good luck.
All right,
Thank you,
thanks,
Jerome.
Doran.
Emily, why don't you come on real quick, and then Glenn, I'm going to ask you to summarize just a closing thought. So Emily, everyone's going to ask me this, so if you could come on this transcript that you're promising, how quickly can you turn it?
That I don't have an exact time frame. I hope to have it to you guys by end of day, so like between 5 and 5:30. It just kind of depends on the meeting ran over, so it takes longer to transcribe. But as soon as I have the recording and transcript, I will shoot it over to you guys' inbox.
And this whole gang has got all the photos that we had from CES, and so they can tap into that. Certainly holler if you need Glenn's bio or mugshot, or that should be in there too. So I think Emily's thought of everything, maybe. So thank you, Emily. And then Glenn, do you want to just summarize? I know we've talked about this for an hour. If we remember one thing about this acquisition, what would it be?
It's remember one thing. It's
That's all I'm capable of.
one thing. I think you can do more, but no, I think it's the acceleration of revenue for MicroVision.
Fantastic. Well, Glenn, the interest is pretty strong, hey? So we'll have to do this when you feel it's necessary. And thanks again for giving us the time. And thanks to the MicroVision team. Thank you guys for your quick turnaround on this. And Holler if you have any questions. Thanks, everyone. We'll end
All
it
right,
here.
will do. All right, thanks, everybody.
now.
Have a great day.